Fresh meat.
1-2, Freddy's coming for you, on today's episode of Playing with Fear. Welcome to JoBlo Horror Videos Playing with Fear, where we take a look at some of the landmark horror titles throughout the history of gaming. Today we jump back to visit two of our old pals with the Nintendo Entertainment System and publisher LJN. We are taking a look at 1990's A Nightmare on Elm Street, the sister release of Friday the 13th released just a year before. And you know what? Just like that game, this one will surprise you. A Nightmare on Elm Street is the brainchild of master of horror Wes Craven. Craven came up with the idea from a mixture of ideas from real life. He read articles from the 70s about refugees fleeing war and genocide in Cambodia and Vietnam who suffered incredibly disturbing nightmares, and some of them even dying during their sleep. It was attributed to sudden unexplained death syndrome, or Brugada syndrome, which is abnormal rhythms in the heart that can cause a heart attack. The thought of nightmares literally killing you was one thing, but he wanted to go deeper. What was in these nightmares? Craven remembered back further to his own childhood, when he was frightened by an elderly man outside his home one night. 5 years after the glut of slasher films began, A Nightmare on Elm Street was released and instantly gave us something different. It made $57 million on a sub-$2 million budget and was insanely popular. The studio New Line would even consider the bulk of their success attributed to the film and character claiming to be the house that Freddy built. It would receive 6 solo sequels, a crossover with his hockey mask counterpart, a short-lived TV series, which you can learn more on in our episode about it in Horror TV Shows We Miss, while also appearing in comics, novels, toys, other assorted merchandise, and of course, video games. Now I said of course video games, but the film franchise only received 2, both of them in the span of 2 years no less. 1989 would give us A Nightmare on Elm Street for the Commodore 64 and IBM computer from Monarch Studio, and 1990 would give us, well, Nightmare on Elm Street for the Nintendo Entertainment System, developed by Rare and published by LJN. A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1989 is super interesting, and I honestly had no idea it existed before doing the research for this video. To be fair though, most of the internet is on the same page there, as it's hard to find really anything at all. The game opens with you picking one of 6 heroes from the 3rd film in the franchise. Yeah, this game takes the characters and story, term used very loosely here, from the 3rd and 4th films as they were the 2 most recent during development. Once you select your main character, you are thrust into a top-down bird's-eye view of your character running around to find Freddy's house, while avoiding a huge version of the Dream Killer himself. Once you enter, your job is to continually traverse downward into the house while fighting enemies and collecting items along the way. The aesthetic is Chip's challenge getting stuck in a Freddy Krueger nightmare. Where Freddy's house is at the beginning of the game, as well as what floor your friends are on and where on the floor they're trapped, is procedurally generated, so you get a little replay value there, but the game can be a difficult slog. There is no music, and although the presentation on the IBM version is crisp for the time, the Commodore 60 version isn't pretty. The game gets virtually no love or coverage, but it's worth looking into and is considered abandonware now, i.e. free to download. Be careful though, you need the manual too, as it's an old school copy protected game. The next year, Rare, yeah, that Rare, the British powerhouse that gave us Battletoads, Donkey Kong Country, and GoldenEye, would develop A Nightmare on Elm Street to be distributed by LJN. The original concept of this game was just wild. It was pitched that the player would control Freddy and kill off the teenagers trying to bury his bones to be rid of him. Nintendo kind of takes umbrage at religious imagery, sex or nudity, and child murder. The game was released in October, nice, of 1990 for the Nintendo Entertainment System to not great reviews. However, now 30 years later, it's starting to be looked at a little more kindly. Collect Freddy's bones and burn them. Next section. Okay, it's slightly more than that, but really not by much. You play as an unnamed teenager of the titular Elm Street on a quest to find all of Freddy Krueger's bones and burn them to ash, forever stopping his reign of terror. You need to stay awake while you visit various houses on the street, as well as the junkyard and the high school. Pretty marquee landmarks throughout the run of the series' biggest films. That's honestly it. Most of the rest of what goes on will be covered in the gameplay section. And here we are. At its heart, A Nightmare on Elm Street is a collectathon platformer. You play as one of the teenagers being stalked by Freddy on Elm Street, and your goal is to collect his bones from every single stage until you defeat him and burn his bones to ash. You start on the famous street and pick one of the houses. The houses are switched around in the order that you enter them with every playthrough, but the levels themselves never change. On the street and in each house are enemies trying to stop you. Shamblers, Skellos, Deathwings, Night Prowlers, Hounds, and Boggles all try to stop you. My amazing editor is doing his stuff to show you that these are actually non-copyright infringing bats, dogs, zombies, skeletons, and whatever the hell a boggle is. These creatures aren't the only things out to get you, as time itself is your enemy. As bad as all these things are while you're awake, they pull a Castlevania 2 and have a terrible night for a curse. As the level ticks on, you can find cups of coffee on the ground to keep you awake. If you stop moving for too long or go too long without coffee, you'll fall asleep. In the dream world, the levels retain the same architecture, but the color schemes change, and the enemy skins are different in addition to them being stronger against your attacks, and with their attacks being stronger against you. It's not all to their benefit, however, as in the dream world you can take advantage of certain powers. The Acrobat, Necromancer, and Shadow Dancer all elevate the player in different ways. When you are in the waking world, your player avatar just kinda looks like an extra from Saved by the Bell. His jump is good but feels unwieldy, and his only means of attack is to punch everything that comes his way. In the dream world, though, you can switch between the 3 powers by hitting select. The Acrobat can do a roll jump and throw a javelin, the Necromancer has a Princess Peach-like jump glide and launches a fireball-like attack, and the Shadow Dancer can throw a ninja star as well as do an aimed jump kick. You aren't granted these powers automatically, you do need to pick up the item boxes when you're in the dream world to use them. It's also a cool nod to the third movie, where the teens can kinda pick their own powers. The trade-off is, of course, that the enemies are tougher in the dream world. But you do have more than just a hand-to-hand combat. There's one more thing to watch out for, however. Freddy can stalk you in the dream world. The longer you stay asleep, the more likely you are to get attacked by Freddy. The level music, which is composed by David Wise and is great by the way, suddenly shifts to an 8-bit version of the series' famous nursery rhyme. And then it's only a matter of time until you have to face off with the Springwood Slasher. Once defeated, you can get back to his bones on the various levels. The 3 houses, the junkyard, the cemetery, Freddy's house, and finally the school. At the end of each stage, once you've collected the requisite number of bones, you fight a Freddy boss variant. These bosses include a razor claw hand, a Freddy head reminiscent of the snake creature from Part 3, a flying razor claw, a Freddy bat, a Freddy ghost, and a head razor claw combination. The only optional boss fights are the ones where Freddy comes for you in the dream world. You can completely avoid these by either collecting all the bones that open up the exit and boss fight, or by finding a boombox to wake you up, because of course that's what does it. It's all pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it, and you can have multiple strategies for each stage. The final one is long and difficult, culminating in a boss rush mode as you face off against Krueger one final time. The unfortunate part here is that he is the exact same model and fight style as the optional mid-stage boss fights. Beat him and burn his bones down to ashes to complete the game. The final thing of note, and it's an interesting one, is that this game is 4-player compatible right off the bat. Just plug in 4 controllers into a multi-tap and you can have a spooky 8-bit nightmare fest. Well, the question we've come to ask at the end of all these videos is, say it with me, is the game scary? Like many of the games from this time, no, it's not. But also, like most of its horror contemporaries, it certainly could have been at the right age or frame of mind. The opening screen may look silly, but for a Nintendo game in the earliest of the early 90s, it's done well and kinda freaky. The music here fits the game like a razor blade glove, and in some instances adds genuine dread. When the music changes in the dream world from the fast-paced action tune to the simple nursery rhyme, you feel the need to hurry the hell up. The screen turns black and you get blood-red letters exclaiming that Freddy is here, which can be a bit palm sweat-inducing. The rest of the game has a generally fun and spooky tone and atmosphere, but overall just doesn't stand the test of time in terms of fright. The game's legacy is mostly tied to the label of being a bad game. Obviously, it can be obtuse in parts and difficult, sure, but I think the people that are rediscovering it now, much later, agree that it's a solid game for the most part. It's ripe for satire with its graphics, controls, and difficulty spike, but playing it more, I would even say that it's better than the Friday the 13th sister game on the same console. And that's the one I had as a kid and really enjoyed.
Please, God.
This is God.
Freddy Krueger as a character has certainly infiltrated the pop culture zeitgeist like few others, but in terms of video games, one of the biggest media spaces of all, he's been awfully quiet. Apart from this game and the still grossly underdiscussed IBM and Commodore 64 title from the year prior, Freddy has only been a guest character in Mortal Kombat 9 and the horror icon showcase game Dead by Daylight. Part of this is almost certainly because the series has been dormant since the much-maligned remake, and the only other appearance from the bastard son of 1,000 maniacs was on an episode of The Goldbergs. Hopefully the rights owners can figure out what to do on-screen and in video game form. Also hopefully while Robert Englund still wants to help out with the character. NECA, purveyor of all things cool horror toys, did put out a GameStop exclusive Freddy figure based on the game, but other than that, this title lives in that nebulous space that ignored ROMs go to die. Did you play this one when it came out? Do you prefer this one or Jason's 8-bit outing? What do you want to see in a Nightmare on Elm Street game in the future if we get one? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Horror Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all our latest videos. We're an independent company and we appreciate all your support.